Okay, we want to talk a little bit now and show you some of the parts and pieces for, up at the ridge or the top of the roof. Now, we have both vented closures and non-vented closures. Fab-Brow, as a general rule, recommends that you vent every ridge. God, I lost my train of thought. Okay, we want to spend a little time now talking about the ridge caps and the accessories and parts and pieces with that. This is our WRH3 ridge cap. You notice we put a little bit of a profile to it. We do that to a lot of our ridge caps to break that flat metal to minimize oil canning, so this will stay looking nice from the ground. Now, there's a couple ways we can do these, vented and non-vented, but before we get into that, we want to mention, in the previous videos, we showed that we set the nail to hold these in place. Well, now it's time to put some fasteners in here and anchor these down permanently. Now, if you're in warm weather climates and you're installing these, 3 screws is sufficient. If you're up in more of a northern state where snow can be a concern, you may be introducing snow retention, which is going to add load to these panels. They're going to want to try to pull even harder. So we like to set 6 screws in the top of these panels if you're in an area where you have snow. That way, if you do add snow guards down the road, you don't have to pull this apart. You've already got the correct amount of fasteners there. Okay, that being said, we have a solid foam closure that seals this up tight. Okay, and we also have a vented closure that allows the transmission of air, so it'll allow the heat out of the attic space, the warm air out of the attic, but it prevents debris, wind-driven rain from getting into the attic space. We always recommend that you vent ridges. Okay, it's always a good idea to allow a place to vent for that air to get out. Now, no matter which of these closures you do use, we do recommend a row of butyl sealant tape. The closure gets set into the sealant tape. Now, what that does, that prevents wind-driven rain from getting driven in underneath or into the side on those times where you have heavy rain and high winds, okay? The sealant tape does that. Plus, the sealant tape over time, and you may have seen this, these things can try to start working their way out. So the sealant tape keeps them in over long periods of time. So that's 2 reasons to use the sealant tape up here, okay? Now, once you get these in, one more thing to think about. What you want to do is set your ridge cap and figure out where your ridge cap's going to be. We want to try to keep these within a 1/2 inch from the end of the ridge cap. That keeps you from having a big void in there that can catch leaves and catch debris. So we want to hold it within a 1/2 inch. That way that debris doesn't get caught up in there, okay? Now, at the end of this thing, there's a couple ways you can do this. You can run sealants and sealers to close this, or you can put a couple cuts in it and bend some of this down just like we did the gable trim. Okay, you've got a couple options on how you want to do that. Now, when you get ready to attach this, we use a smaller screw. It's a 12 by 3/4 stitch. It's still got a hex head with a rubber washer. Screwed through the ridge cap, through the closure, into the top of every seam. So you'll have a screw every 16 inches going across. And we want to make sure we hit every seam. If you do every other seam, this one could have a tendency to bow up and then you have a little bow. So we want to catch a 12 by 3/4 stitch every seam going across the roof.